Today on The Rare Advisor, we're going deep on the subject of acquisition, specifically client and asset acquisition, how to grow your practice fast and healthy. Welcome again to The Rare Advisor, a business model supercharged by recurring and repeatable events. My name is Mike Walters. Today, again, I am joined by Steve Phillips, who heads up USA Financial Protocol, which is our mentoring and coaching program. In the previous edition, we were discussing the three phases that every financial practice goes through. And candidly, you can't operate your practice effectively, efficiently, or accurately, at least not from a strategic standpoint, unless you understand which phase you are in or which combination of phases you might be straddling. So if you enjoy this type of information, if we're helping you in sharing these insider trade secrets, by all means, please like, subscribe, comment, whether you're watching by video, whether you're listening to us through a podcast. Keeping us involved and keeping us front in mind is definitely helpful on our standpoint, but it also helps us to drive the appropriate content back in your direction. So Steve, as I mentioned on our last discussion, we are like deep in your wheelhouse. You and I have known each other for 30 years roughly. Originally friendly competitors, then I would say almost business confidants. And to this day, I'm happy to say, for the last couple of years, we've been actually on the same team. We've joined forces. It's all part of the mothership here at USA Financial. So that's been very exciting for you and I to kind of see that through full circle. And speaking of that, the session or the section I'd like to focus on of those three phases now, it's kind of like a throwback to the beginning, if you will, but it's really not the beginning because, as we mentioned earlier, it's like, think of the recycle emblem, right? What starts as the beginning ends up, you're back there at the end once more. So in terms of acquisition, and by definition of acquisition for what we're referring to, we're looking at client and asset acquisition is what we mean by that subject, not going out and acquiring a practice. We would throw that into a separate section. But from the idea of client and asset acquisition, how would you give that an initial launching pad? How would you describe that? And then we can kind of dive deep from there.
Yeah, it's a good question. And first, 30 years, and here we are on the same team. And you know why that kind of stuff happens is the same mind. So it's pretty cool to the three phases is just the tip of the iceberg of how USA Financial and what was Advisor Protocol think the same. How are we going to provide true ongoing value to the advisors that are a fit for us and make sure that we're not all things to all advisors. So right. It's great to be a part of this. The acquisition, when the protocol team first started banging around with this and then working with the execs at the mothership at USA, the whole idea of acquisition, a lot of advisors will think, okay, that's building the thing. We used to say it's getting the company off the deck. And what are the things that really are most important? You've certainly added some pieces to that conversation, but we think of things like client acquisition, of course, quickly. But then we added to it. So if you're building a practice, you want to bring on clients quickly, but is there a way then to have those be ideal or best clients right away? And there is. So we sort of applied, when you look at business refinement and practice management, we wanted to apply some techniques there so that we were helping advisors. There's this thing where everybody counts. If you can fog a mirror, you're a client, all of that. Well, there are certain processes where we can help advisors bring on high-level clients, advocate clients from the start. And of course, as you mentioned, we've got tools and all of that, and there's several advisors that have been through our program. The idea then around clients was there's costs. You and I talked about the challenges or the issues that each phase presents. So there are opportunities, but you have to address challenges. So what about marketing costs? What about acquisition costs? We use the phrase, once upon a time, it's the hamster wheel, that advisors say, I'm spending more and more and more money on marketing every year, but I don't seem to be getting any results. And so you start to look at things like fill the room. and how we've perfected that over 20 plus years at USA Financial. And then in the midst of the pandemic that we were and are going through, digital filled the room. And there are methods to, and that's just one of a myriad of acquisition initiatives that we apply to the advisors we work with that are focused on not just acquisition of clients, but acquisition of the right clients. And here's the thing, Mike, and I really want your input on this, is if you could say to an advisor, let's talk about acquisition and stabilizing marketing costs. And again, under the banner of the words matter, we know a lot of our competition says, let's eliminate your marketing costs. Well, if you've been in the industry for 30 minutes, you know that eliminating marketing costs is not only impossible, but it's ridiculous and it's counterproductive.
It's also called business failure.
Right, exactly. So exactly. But if you said stabilizing marketing costs, now how would we do that? And we'll get into a session on what we do in business refinement. But imagine, just quickly, if you acquired the right clients from the very beginning, their ideal clients, and that there was a method or a process in place to have those clients not be referring you, but introducing you to others, here's what happens.
Yeah.
Acquisition increases, but there is and this isn't guessing, there's a proven process then to stabilize marketing, the marketing cost and the acquisition cost.
Yeah. And
so to break it down and put those pieces together, it's a difference maker.
Right. And so what I would add to that is the other side of the same coin is knowing how to appropriately track that, because that's what then allows you to get the stabilization that you're talking about. Because, everybody knows, well, if I throw money at a problem, hopefully I can solve the problem. That's not always the case. But, generally speaking, when you're talking about marketing costs, you're talking about, in this case, the acquisition of new clients. And so if we were not in the intangible business that we are all in, if we were in a tangible environment, they would call that cost of goods sold. So if we were in a manufacturing plant, this would be a cost of goods sold that you would refer to in this sense. For us, it's really what most would call cost of revenue. So you have a cost of revenue. And what that means is that once you're dialing into the process, which Steve and his team spend so much time helping you do, once you've dialed into that process, now you want to track the numerics. So what does it cost me to get a new client? What does it cost me to bring on these new assets? And while each individual client will vary a little bit, you're going to find that you're going to zero in on some pretty tight averages. And you're going to then know, what does it take to create that next chunk of revenue, because you'll know what the cost of that revenue actually is. So whether it was, when we're not in a pandemic and you're doing traditional live client events, or whether when you are locked down and you're in pandemic mode, if you're doing some of these things virtually, or the reality is that people are doing it both ways now, right? Because we found that there's power in both of them. And you can track the numerics on them. And then the introduction programs help us improve those numerics. But it's also kind of a chicken and egg conversation, right? Because you can't get quality introductions until you have already secured quality clientele in the first place. But all of these processes, the backside of the same coin, becomes tracking those marketing expenses so that you can stabilize them. And again, the proper way, at least the way I like to do it, is think of it as cost of revenue, because you can assign a cost of revenue number, and then you can even put targets on it. So you can start to identify, hey, I want to get my cost of revenue down by 10% next year. And you can start to tweak and adjust the processes and the systems to zero in on what works best to drive costs down or to drive performance up, so that you're able to acquire the next client. But again, keeping in mind, I don't want to acquire the wrong client, because now my cost of revenue is wasted. I want to acquire the right client.
Mike, you said several things there that I really want to touch on. Number one is, I want to reduce my cost by 10%. So for advisors that might be participating with us here that haven't experienced anything that USA does, if a firm said something like that to you, my question is, what's the tangible process to do that? Right. This is something that I think our industry has been famous for over the years. We're just going to throw stuff out there. And you're right. If you're not tracking, if you're not keeping track of what the costs are and the tangible ways to, how's your firm doing that? I want to reduce my cost without reducing the acquisition results. I want to know what your current firm is doing. The other thing that you said, so over the last several years, as Protocol has really built out our processes and gotten so deeply ingrained with the initiatives that USA provides, one thing became clear in 2020, didn't it? Is that this is an industry that tends to be stuck in its ways, both advisors and marketing companies or whatever you call your support mothership. And if 2020 proved anything, is that especially when it comes to acquisition, these are moving targets. Fill the Room, we could say legitimately that Fill the Room is probably one of the best, if not the best acquisition initiatives that's ever come across our industry. And we got to a point in 2020 where it was essentially dead in the water. So we can act like every other firm and just keep throwing it out there, unaware that we really need to be shifting, not only just us shifting, but providing leadership to advisors to shift. And so, or we come up with it's digital Fill the Room, it's virtual Fill the Room. And I'm sure we're going to have an opportunity to talk about that initiative later, but I think you can tell I feel very, very strongly about if there's one thing that happens in 3 phases that has to happen with the firm and does happen with USA. If you're not adapting, if you're not updating, if you don't recognize that the industry and indeed the public is a moving target, you're dead in the water. And if the 3 phases does one thing, Mike, it is that we are aware of what advisors go through and have the ability collectively as an executive team and as a boots on the ground support teams to make those things happen as the opportunities as they come up.
Yeah, when you talk about things like a pandemic, what happens is it makes it really evident really quickly that those who thrive, not just survive, but those who thrive, they understand the idea of strategic byproduct, because there's always an opportunity, no matter how dire a situation might be, there's always the next opportunity that's somewhere baked into that. And so there were strategic byproducts that came through the pandemic. One of them was not only the obvious that you pointed out, we took things that weren't digital and we made them digital. But also the reason that works is because think about, if you're an advisor in, let's say, a northern state and you have clientele who go south for the winter, snowbirds as we're calling them. Oftentimes the problem is, how do you communicate with the snowbird when they're down south and you're, hundreds, if not thousands of miles away? And that's always been a challenge in this industry. Now what's happened through the pandemic, clientele who are in their 60s, their 70s, their 80s, and even beyond, they have figured out how to run Zoom calls and how to do video chats and so on and so forth. That would have been a 10 or 15 year learning curve under any other set of circumstances for that age group. In fact, the learning curve really wouldn't have even been a learning curve. It would have been an age curve. It would have been when people in their 50s got to that age, that's when it would have started working. But now the pandemic has taken what would have taken 10, 12, 15 years to get the population to. And we got them there in less than a year because they wanted to talk to the grandkids. They wanted to stay connected with the families. And now the strategic byproduct for every financial advisor out there is you can dial into your clients digitally in ways you couldn't do prior to the year 2020. So now how do you capitalize on that? How do you create systems and processes around that?
Yeah. And which is another good point. You make me think of so many things when we're having these conversations. Under the umbrella of good business refinement, practice management, and leadership of a firm or an advisor through the 3 phases, when you talk about what's happened, the Zoom revolution, the digital revolution, and that what we speak to advisors about at USA is positioning everything as a service to best clients. Now let that settle in on you for a minute if you're watching with us. Everything you do is a service to best clients. Right. So if you said that, and we've counseled advisors, this is a part of acquisition. It's also a part of expansion and retaining best clients. You mentioned snowbirds, you mentioned grandkids, that kind of thing. I'm positioning, you're going to want to learn to do Zoom strategy and tactical meetings with me, your advisor, Mike. And here's what we're going to do for you. We're going to show you how to stay connected to your kids and your grandkids. This is an additional service.
Right.
It's the smallest things that change the dynamic of what's happening in the mind of a client. And so those things, while seemingly simple, have to permeate really the value that we provide. And it's really funny because I know you have stories of your dad. I'm thinking of my dad, who just turned 83 and still doing it, man. He's still out there doing it. And when I think of the Zoom stuff, he was like, I don't hear from the girls, meaning our two girls, the granddaughters. And I'm like, what do you, I'm leaving phone messages. I'm like, oh my God, Dad. Okay, here's the thing. They don't call Dad back. You've got to catch up, man. It's text. It's YouTube. It's videos. It's virtual. That personal story, and my dad happens to be an advisor. He's like, how do I connect to my granddaughters? Well, imagine, man, under acquisition, we're going to help you acquire new clients. We're making sure that the things that we do at USA are relevant, and everything we do is positioned so that you can offer value to your best clients. And that personal story resonates all over the place. And you're right. It's not the 10 or 12 or generational curve. It's happened in less than a year, probably 6 months.
Yep, definitely. Well, if this lights a fire under you, if this helps you to think strategically about your practice, I'd ask a quick favor. Please like, subscribe, comment. The Rare Advisor is all about you. It's talking about the business model that's supercharged by recurring and repeatable events, how to turn these things into systems and processes in your business. So, Steve, thank you so much for your time. We're going to be back on the next session. We're going to go to the next in order of the 3 phases. We were just talking about acquisition. Next, we will be talking about expansion. So thanks, everyone, for hanging in there and for checking out the Rare Advisor. And we'll be back again with you soon. Thank you.